We're making 4029 News on the Arkansas CW, the most watched local 9 p.m. news.
Tonight, 7 women say that a local doctor inappropriately groped or sexually harassed them during exams. The complaint's so serious that the Arkansas State Medical Board issued an emergency suspension of his medical license. This until a hearing could be held. But now he's back on the job in Cave Springs, his license reinstated, and his former patients demanding answers.
It's been hard, and it just simply didn't have to happen.
Penny Wolf was the first of 7 women to file a complaint with the Arkansas State Medical Board against Dr. Adam Moss, an endocrinologist in Northwest Arkansas. Endocrinologists help patients with hormone-related issues such as diabetes.
I remember sitting on the table and Mr. Moss running his hands up my legs. And he just kept running his hands up my legs.
It was nearly 15 years ago when she filed a complaint with the medical board and a police report in Lowell about what she says happened at her appointment with Dr. Moss at Lowell Medical Center.
He proceeded to put his hand up underneath my shirt, up underneath my bra, and grope my breasts very inappropriately. And I remember him saying, "Oh, nice." And I remember putting my hands up over my face, and I was starting to cry. And I said, "Oh, no, this is uncomfortable. I no, why?" And he said, "It's okay, we won't do it next time."
The Lowell Police Department did investigate. No charges were filed. The Arkansas State Medical Board determined her complaint didn't rise to the level of gross negligence. Moss is currently practicing in Cave Springs. A 4029 investigation found that Wolf's complaint was just the beginning. On August 12th of last year, the Arkansas State Medical Board issued an emergency suspension of Dr. Moss's license after receiving 3 different complaints from women who described similar experiences with him. According to that suspension order, Dr. Moss was accused of engaging in inappropriate sexual contact with patients and utilized acts which sexually harassed patients within a clinic setting concurrent with the physician-client relationship. 4029 obtained documents from the Arkansas State Medical Board through a Freedom of Information request. We learned that during his suspension, 3 more women filed complaints with the board. 7 complaints in all. In December, the board held a hearing and voted to reinstate his license.
The original allegations in the complaint are unfounded based upon the results of Dr. Moss's evaluation.
That determination was based on a psychiatrist's evaluation of Dr. Moss as relayed by the medical board attorney.
The contact may have been inappropriate, but it was determined not to be sexual in nature.
This is Moss walking toward the front of the room at the beginning of his hearing. Once seated, you cannot see him because of the camera placement on the Zoom meeting. You can hear him, though.
I've learned a lot through the process. I've spent the last 18 years caring for patients, and none of my actions in managing these patients were outside of medical necessity.
But board president Dr. Sylvia Simon pointed out that he never documented those exams.
And if they were medically appropriate exams, and then you do not include the results of that exam, then to us as peers reviewing that, it makes us wonder why you did an exam that you didn't think you needed to document results of.
She also expressed concern that none of the women in the complaints had a chaperone in the exam room.
I can't imagine being reported to the police for a potential assault and then getting in trouble again later for the same issue with no chaperone. I mean, that's pretty concerning to me.
I understand. I use chaperone for an exam. All the patients that I would see were offered chaperones for exams. The ones that, that there are patients that were comfortable not. One of the issues, so I did have my medical assistants over the last, 12 years have been males. And so in that space, there were definitely times with which I was rushing.
But 6 of the women involved told us that they were not offered chaperones and stated that in the complaints to the medical board. They also say they told the board attorney that they wanted to speak at the hearing, but were not given that opportunity. 3 of the women's complaints are about what happened to them in 2010 when Dr. Moss worked at Mercy Hospital. During the hearing, one board member asked Moss why Mercy terminated him in 2019.
That had nothing to do. There were there were no allegations, in any way related to this. The issue at Mercy was just related to issues between myself and one of the administrators.
We reached out to Mercy to ask about his history there, but a spokesperson says the hospital will not comment on personnel matters. Wolf says the board's decision dredges up painful memories of when she says her complaints fell on deaf ears.
If he had been stopped, if those in power had done their job, he would have been stopped, but he wasn't. You internalize it and it becomes a scar. It's a scar that's not easy to get over.
Penny Wolf was the first of at least 7 women to file complaints with the Arkansas State Medical Board against Cave Springs endocrinologist Dr. Adam Moss in 2007. She also filed a police report after she says she was sexually assaulted by him. No charges were filed against the doctor, and the medical board found that her complaint did not rise to the level of gross negligence.
I tried. I did try. And, to hear these other women cry, it's despicable to me. It just shouldn't have happened.
Wolf says in 2021 she learned that she wasn't alone after 3 women filed similar complaints with the medical board. Those complaints are what led the board to suspend his license for a little more than 3 months. During that period, our 4029 investigation found that 3 more women filed complaints with the board to report that they too had been sexually inappropriately touched by Dr. Moss. But despite those complaints and concerns expressed by some members of the medical board, they voted to reinstate his license in December.
The contact may have been inappropriate, but it was determined not to be sexual in nature.
The women in the complaints say they told the board attorney that they wanted to speak at that hearing, but were not given the opportunity. So now they're speaking to 4029. They did not want their faces shown.
It's hard. There was no justice.
And I was afraid to talk and afraid that I was the only one. And so, helpless, couldn't talk to anyone, had to hold my secret in.
For years, she didn't know it was a secret that connected her to at least 6 strangers. Last year, some of the women in the complaints found each other thanks to a Facebook forum called NWA Moms, where local moms can share experiences and seek advice on various healthcare providers. That's when they realized they weren't alone and felt empowered to come forward, a comfort they hope to afford other women who might be in a similar situation.
When I realized it wasn't just me and it was multiple women, it was time for me to speak out. It was time for me to come forward, and I hope I can protect my children, other people's children, other women that get to go see him, have to go see him. I hope that I can protect them and that something will be done and he will be held accountable for what he has done.
The women in the complaints say the medical board's decision to reinstate Dr. Moss's license delivered a blow they didn't see coming and dredges up painful memories they're desperate to put behind them.
It's hard. It's hard to feel love and accept love again when you've been touched inappropriately.
Some of the women say they struggle with guilt that they didn't do more to stop Dr. Moss during their appointments.
I couldn't move. Honestly, what's going through my mind right now is my 6-year-old. I was just way braver than me.
We reached out to Dr. Moss. He has not returned our calls. Dr. Moss did speak during the medical board hearing in December where they voted to reinstate his license. You can't see him on Zoom, but you can hear him defend his actions.
I've learned a lot through the process. I've spent the last 18 years caring for patients, and none of my actions in managing these patients were outside of medical necessity.
Despite that claim, Dr. Moss did not document those exams he called necessary, and the women in the complaints say his actions caused them a great deal of pain that's not lost on their families. One relative spoke to us on behalf of his loved one, but didn't want to show his face.
When you see a loved one that is hurting, and that it's really affected their lives. A one-time simple event that that they're going to carry with them for years, and it's just terrible to see a family member going through that, and there's nothing that you can do to help them.
And as for Penny Wolf, she says the board's decision is all too reminiscent of her cry for help nearly 15 years ago that she says fell on deaf ears.
If he had been stopped, if those in power had done their job, he would have been stopped, but he wasn't.